Hey everyone, welcome to the PCS-Proof Podcast, where we're covering the vital things you need to know to thrive in every season of military life. I'm your host and milspouse fitness expert, Grace Barnick-Damazo, and I encourage you to join me each week as we dive deep into topics like fitness, wellness, and entrepreneurship as a military spouse so that you can maintain your own sense of identity and purpose, conquering every transition with strength and resilience. As we journey together, you can expect uplifting conversations and insights. We'll share some laughs, and you can count on me to keep it real so that together we can become truly PCS-proof. Now let's get into it. Welcome back to another episode of the PCS-Proof Podcast. So happy you're here. This episode is going to be a little bit less structured, and that is partially because of just the accumulation of circumstances. This week has been really crazy. I had a very sick dog and ended up having to spend almost 2 days just making sure that he was okay and staying up all night with him and then trying to get him into the vet the next day and all the recovery from that. So it's partially from that. And I'm getting ready to head out of town to play in another softball tournament. So just trying to catch up from the dog being sick and then wanting to still make sure that I get an episode out to you and being what I would like to be, which is an example that you don't have to be perfect in order to make progress. There are going to be episodes where I am very well thought out and I've really put a ton of time into it because I care about putting out a good product. And then there are going to be these weeks that are just crazy, but I still want to be there for you guys and be consistent and also model that it doesn't have to be perfect in order to take action. So this is going to be one of those weeks of it's not going to be perfect. I recognize that. I hope you guys don't mind it being a little bit more candid and flawed, but let that just be an example of how we think we have to be perfect in order to be successful, but that's not the case. We just have to take imperfect action. And I think that's been really the story of my life is just taking imperfect action. And it's gotten me a lot further than doing nothing at all. I can tell you that. And this week is also something I just really love talking about. So it's perfect timing and I don't want to wait on it because it's all happening right now. And that is the MLB, the baseball, Major League Baseball playoffs are happening right now, and I cannot get enough. Anyone who knows me, and maybe you know this from the first couple episodes of the podcast, I love baseball. I love softball. I used to hate it. When I was growing up, my dad would kind of force us to watch it. Like we weren't allowed to watch TV unless we were folding laundry, and there were 7 people in our family, so there was always laundry, nonstop laundry. And so that was our time to watch TV. But if it was baseball season, my dad would come in and he would change the channel to whatever baseball game was on. It's his house, so he gets to commandeer the TV whenever he wants. And I used to hate it. Oh my God, baseball's so boring. Why do I have to watch this? Now I'm stuck folding laundry and I have to watch baseball. But over time, listening to him talk about it and just watching it and being an observer of baseball and then starting to play softball as a teen, I realized how much I appreciated the amount of imperfection in the game and how it's a thinking game. You're always thinking about what's going to happen next. The situation changes with every pitch. And it really became, as you learn more about it, it becomes something that is just, it's the opposite of boring. It is so entertaining and it just pulls you in. And then there's this aspect of just human athletics and watching people who are seemingly superhuman do superhuman things. And it's just exciting on top of that. So there's just these layers to it that I just love. I cannot get enough of. And I am obsessed with postseason baseball, especially because I have a couple teams that are in the running that I'm really rooting for. So that makes it all the more fun. I'm even more invested in it. So if you're not watching, I highly recommend, just for entertainment value, to get watching. But I also wanted to share a couple things that I love about baseball as a metaphor for us, as a metaphor for perseverance through failure and picking yourself back up and having that mental resilience, which is something that we in military life, especially military spouses, really have to embody, right? We don't really have a choice. We have to figure out how to be mentally resilient, and how to overcome failure and setbacks and obstacles in order to persevere and succeed. So I wanted to talk today about baseball and, by extension, softball as a metaphor for that perseverance through failure, because the high failure rates of the game, coupled with the mental toughness that's required to persist, so mirror what we need to do in military life. So success in baseball and softball is not measured by avoiding failure. We embrace it, and it's about how players and we can recover and adjust after that failure and after we fall. And this the resilience and the grit. I love the grit of baseball and softball, and it just is such a perfect example and symbol for us in military life. So I just wanted to go through a couple things. Again, this is not going to be super structured. It's not really well laid out, but these are just a couple of my thoughts about how we can relate baseball to our lives and use those as a metaphor for ourselves. And I wanted to start with one of my favorite examples of persevering through failure or accepting. I guess it's accepting failure as part of our lives. And that is the example of the high failure rate for batters. If you are a batter in baseball or softball, you are constantly experiencing failure. In fact, the best hitters fail most of the time when they come to the plate. So the average player, and we're talking mostly MLB because that's where we get most of the stats from, but I guarantee that it's very similar across the board, baseball, softball. But we're going to use stats from the MLB. So the average batter hits with a 300 batting average. That's .300, which if we're equating that to percentages, that's about 30% of the time. So every 10 at-bats that a player walks up to the plate, they fail 70% of the time. So 7 out of 10 times that they walk to the plate, they are not going to get on base. Only 3 of the at-bats on average will they get a hit. So just to reiterate that, you're failing 7 out of 10 times. You're only succeeding 3 out of 10 times. And that is considered an exceptional player. That is, like, if you're hitting 300 in a season across the board, you're doing really well. So you can imagine a below exceptional player is doing less than that. They're failing more than 7 out of 10 times, or more than 70% of the times. And this teaches players to accept failure as part of the process and celebrate small successes. So we can carry this over to a season for a team. The average successful MLB team isn't going to win all of their games. There's 162 games in the regular season. It's a lot of games. You can't expect to win all of those. Like, there has never been an undefeated season for an MLB team. In comparison to, let's say, like NFL teams, there are maybe every couple seasons, there's a team that goes undefeated for the entire season. Now they're playing 17 games, I think it is. So there's much fewer games. But baseball has a much higher unpredictability. So the best teams in the league are going to lose 30% of the time on average. They lose 30% of those 162 games. And that is a winning season. And similarly, or conversely, the worst teams in the league are going to win 30% of the time. They're still going to have some wins in there. So there's failure and loss built into the core of what baseball is. And it's part of the game. And then similarly, striking out, if we're going back to talking about being on the plate, striking out is a regular part of baseball. You're going to strike out a lot. Even great players strike out quite often. So the Hall of Famer player, he's a Hall of Fame player, Reggie Jackson, he struck out more than 2,500 times over the course of his career. But he's still in the Hall of Fame. He's remembered as a clutch performer. So that means he came through when the stakes were very high. And he struck out over 2,500 times. So it's built into the core of the game, this idea of striking out, failing. And I've mentioned this already, but baseball is described as a mental game. It's a thinking game. And players have to be mentally resilient, knowing that failure is inevitable. You cannot go into a game or go into a career in baseball or softball thinking that you're never going to fail. If you think that way, you are literally going to fail because you're not accepting the fact that it's part of the game. The challenge is to figure out how to keep moving forward and use every at-bat or every pitch as an opportunity to learn something and to grow a little bit. And that is so important for us to take away. Every failure is an opportunity to learn something, or every obstacle is an observation. You have to figure out, what am I supposed to learn and gain from this experience that I can take into the next quote unquote at bat, the next stage in my life. And again, this is a long season. Baseball and softball seasons are long. They span, even for softball, they can be over 100 games. So it requires us as players, but also if we're relating this to humans as people, to have a short memory when it comes to making mistakes and experiencing failure. We can't dwell on past errors, on that past failure, because it will derail our future success. If we, if we're using the example of an at bat, if I'm dwelling on that last strikeout and then I go and I take that into the next at bat, what are my odds of success? No, I need to have a short-term memory. What can I learn? What are the things that I can glean from that and take that into the next at bat? And that ability to reset after failure is key to success in the sport, and it's key to success for us in our life. Players go through hitting slumps. That's also a part of the game. You can't expect to be hot. You can't expect to be on and everything be going great for you all the time. And it seems sometimes like you're unable to get a hit no matter how hard you try. Slumps really can test you and your mental toughness. I'm speaking from very close example for myself, experience for myself, that it can really test your mental toughness because it can build, when you're in a slump in baseball or softball, it can get to you. It can get in your head. And the challenge is how can I get away from that? How can I get back to being objective? What's the lesson I can learn? What are the things that I can take? What can I try next? And take that into the next at bat. But it gets really hard. It tests your mental toughness and your ability to continue to show up even when success feels like it's out of reach. And a great example of that from this year and this postseason is Pete Alonso, who is on the New York Mets. He was in a major slump. He's a great player. He's one of the better players in the league right now, but he was in a slump. He had not had a hit. He had we call it 5 for 38, meaning he had only had 5 hits in 38 at-bats, right? So that's not doing great. That's a 132 average. That's hitting just barely once every 10 at-bats. Pretty low. And he had 18 strikeouts within that. But he never gave up, and he still kept his head in there and kept persevering. And he came in clutch. He came in when his team needed him most, when it mattered the most. And in the wild card series just last week, he came up to bat when his team was down, and he hit a 3-run home run in the 9th inning the final inning of the game when his team was about to be eliminated. He hit a 3-run home run and sent his team to the next series to advance to the National League Division Series. So that is what I'm talking about. That is a perfect example of someone who is a good player, who was experiencing a slump, and instead of letting it beat him up, instead of letting him hit that failure take over, he continued to come up to the plate and learn and figure out, hey, let's try something new. And it paid off. He came in clutch, and his team, instead of being eliminated, went on to the next series. And I won't, spoiler alert, but they're doing pretty good. They're doing pretty good right now. So that's a perfect example of that. Overcoming failure, not having a long-term memory, having a very short memory, and continuing to persevere. Baseball is also a team sport. It's a team sport, right? There's 9 players on the field. You have your pitchers, you have your dugout, you have your bullpen. It's a 26-player or team sport in MLB. But most of the actions are actually individual. So there's this nice dynamic of, it's a team sport. We all have to pitch in as a group in order to be successful. But also as a player, I need to pick up my team. So when one player might fall or fail individually, you have your teammates to pick you up. And this really mirrors life, where our individual failures don't always mean total defeat. There are always opportunities to pick each other up. And whether that's in your family unit, whether you have that social network and that social support, maybe it's your neighbors, your fellow mill spouses, your command, everyone is there to help pick each other up when one person is struggling, right? That so mirrors life. And if you want an example of this, I highly recommend that you watch the movie Moneyball. Besides being probably one of the top 3 best movies about baseball out there, I literally could watch this movie every single day and I would never get sick of it. It is just the perfect example of how small, consistent efforts as a group lead to big wins. So it's not just about one individual coming through. Everyone has to pull their part, but it's not about being the hero. Even though home runs are just so exciting, it's going to get the crowd so hyped up when you hit a home run or even a grand slam, so exciting, and everyone loves those big, exciting moments. But they are often not the way to win a season, and most likely are not going to be the way that you win a World Series in the big picture. And last year, the San Diego Padres were a perfect example of this. They relied so much on home runs, and everyone was swinging for the fences. Everyone wanted to be the hero. Everyone wanted to hit that home run to get them to the postseason. And in the end, they came up short. Moneyball is a great example because it's really about those relatively boring singles, bunts, walks to get on base that collectively lead to runs and wins. So it's a perfect example of how, even though we want to do these big things that feel so exciting, I want to run a marathon or do 75 hard or, these big dramatic things, when in reality, it's all about the small, consistent details that are going to get us to the finish line, and in baseball, get you to the World Series. So that's another perfect analogy for us in real life. Baseball also includes all these uncontrollable factors like weather, umpire decisions. There's human error in umpire decisions, right? We cannot control those. Bad bounces. It hits one little rock on the dirt and takes a crazy bounce. Or the spin of the ball ends up hitting the base and bouncing into the outfield. There's all these unpredictable things. No matter how hard we try to control or project based on the statistics, what's going to happen, there's uncontrollable elements that we have no control over. We can't control sometimes when we get injured, right? And we need to be able to maybe be aware of that, but also be accepting of that there are some things that we just cannot control no matter how hard we try. And this kind of leads into, maybe in a roundabout way, one of my favorite records in baseball. There's all these records, most home runs in a career, most steals, most strikeouts in a game. There's all these statistics. There's, if you know anything about baseball, there's literally a statistic for every little thing. But one of my favorite statistics out there, and I think one of the, I would say, my opinion is that this is one of the best records to hold in baseball, is Cal Ripken Jr.'s consecutive game streak. So Cal Ripken Jr., he's still around. He's a player from the 80s and 90s on the Orioles. He holds currently the consecutive games played streak at 2,632 games, which he played from 1982 to 1998. And there's 162 games each season. So he played all 162 games consecutively, no days off, for 16 years. I just think that's insanely amazing, considering that there are so many uncontrollables. Getting sick, right? Getting injured. Something happened, there's just so many uncontrollables, and yet he still managed to play every single game for 16 years. I just think that's insane. And then just as a perspective, on average, fewer than 5 players every season have played all 162 games. So less than 5 players each year are able to do that. He did that for 16 years straight. Pretty amazing, huh? And talking about persevering despite setbacks, there are injuries, right? There's slumps, fielding, pitching slumps. Bad days happen in baseball. Players are judged by how they respond to these setbacks, not by the fact that they occurred. You have to brush that off. Remember, short-term memory. Short memory, let it go. How can we adjust? How can we have continual improvement? How can we mirror those overcoming those obstacles that lead to personal growth off the field? Errors happen. It's just a part of the game. Defensive mistakes happen. Mistakes in the field happen. But great players don't let those errors compound into multiple mistakes. We call that snowballing. We don't let the mistakes snowball. After making an error, a player has to mentally reset and focus on the next play without dwelling on the past. And isn't that a perfect analogy for us? Errors happen. We make a mistake. We slip up. But we don't just give up. We refocus, we mentally reset, and we figure out what our next step is going to be. Similarly, a pitcher can dominate. They can have an amazing game all the way up to the 7th inning if they make it there. And then they can give up that one home run that shifts the momentum. This literally happened yesterday in the Padres-Dodgers playoff game, where the Padres were leading, I think it was 6-1, going into, I don't know, it was the 7th inning maybe. And then a pitcher gave up a grand slam, if you can believe it. So now the score is 6-5. We thought the game was over. Padres were going to win, no problem. And then you just pitch that one pitch that's just a little bit too over the plate, and that batter crushes it. And now the game has completely changed. Pitchers have to overcome these moments. They cannot let that control the rest of their game and the rest of their response. They have to now come back knowing that they just gave up a potentially game-losing pitch and pitch to the next batter. And I just think that's such a perfect example of resilience. And similarly, with overcoming injury, players like Ken Griffey Jr. from the Seattle Mariners or Derek Jeter, I'm sure you've heard of him, for the New York Yankees, had to overcome a ton of injuries throughout their careers. And a lot of people say that they could have done so much better had they not experienced those injuries. And I'm sure that really got to them, hearing that all the time is, you're not living up to our expectations. We expected more from you. You keep getting hurt. We're counting on you. But their ability to come back stronger showcases perseverance in the face of physical setbacks that often we cannot control. Many highly touted players don't live up to the hype. That's just the reality. It is hard to be successful amongst the sea of players. And that's true in life too, right? We're always maybe competing against others, comparing ourselves against others. It's just the unfortunate reality is that we have to kind of compete sometimes. There's players like Justin Turner who didn't live up to his expectations early on in his career. And I'm sure it was very difficult for him to continue to play and continue to try and pursue his dream when it wasn't going as well as he thought it would. He had to work through adversity. And he continued to work on his skills despite struggling early on. He was let go of by the Mets, and he had to reinvent himself in order to continue to be an active player. And with the Dodgers, he became a star. He was known for being a clutch hitter, meaning that he came through when his team needed him most. And he became a solid defensive man. And he's 39, by the way. He's still playing. So that's just an example of, if you feel like you're faltering now, don't give up. If you have a dream, if you have a goal that you're trying to pursue and it just feels like you just can't get any traction, you're working really hard and things are just not working out, be objective about it. Be inquisitive and curious about what can I do, where can I improve, and just keep moving forward. It doesn't mean that if you're not finding success right now, that success isn't waiting for you in the future. And most people give up before that success happens. And I don't want that for you. So use these as an example of Justin Turner is just one example. I could have gone on and on and on. There's so many examples in baseball and in softball of people who persevered and were successful later on in life. Okay. And my last thing that I wanted to kind of share with you is that sometimes the stakes feel so high. Right now we're in the postseason. The stakes feel so high for these players. The pressure is immense. People are counting on them. Families are counting on them. Whole cities are rooting for you, and you just feel the pressure. And oftentimes it feels like that in military life. Whether you're an active duty service man or woman, whether you're a military spouse, there are times when it feels like the stakes are so high and so many people are counting on us. And I just want you guys to maybe take this as an example that don't let the pressure and a little failure in that pressure break you. The stakes are so high and maybe we falter at first, but there's always an opportunity to get back up and succeed. And one of many examples of this are the 2016 Chicago Cubs. The Chicago Cubs were down 3-1 in the World Series. And just for you guys to understand, the World Series is a 7-game series. So in order to win the World Series, you have to win 4 of those 7 games. So when I say that Chicago Cubs were down 3-1, what that really means is that they literally could not lose a game. If the other team won one more game, it was over. So the Cubs, down 3-1 in the series, had to win 3 consecutive games. They had no choice. And they did. They persevered, and they won the World Series in 2016. And this just is an example, and it exemplifies resilience and being able to come together, all these pieces that we talked about, really come together, not let it break you, not let it get your attitude down, and just come back the next day. What do I need to do today? What do I need to do to be a great teammate? What do I need to do to learn from my failures in the past? Have a short-term memory. Hey, we're down 3-1. We just lost 3 games. Have a short memory. Hey, we can still win tomorrow. Hey, we can still win the next game. And so that's all I really have for today. Again, I appreciate you guys kind of going on this little ride with me, this little tangent with me. I love baseball. I love it as an entertainment source. I love it for the stories. There's so many amazing stories. If you guys don't know who Shohei Ohtani is by now, you guys are living under a rock. Shohei Ohtani, one of the best players probably ever in baseball, is currently playing in the postseason for the first time ever. He's been in the MLB for now 5 years, 2018 to now, so I think this is his 6th year, and he's never been to the playoffs before. This is his first year in the playoffs. So just to be able to watch the best player probably that will ever come along in baseball, and we get to watch him now. Like, if you guys are not watching baseball, this is the time to be watching. But as you're watching, I hope that you can take some of these things that we talked about in this episode today and see how it plays out on the field. You see these players striking out. You see pitchers giving up home runs and giving up clutch hits. You see errors on the field. You see base running errors. All these things are happening with these elite players. And if these elite players can make errors and still come back from them, why can't we? Why can't we use that as an example for ourselves, right? These elite athletes still fail. Let's give ourselves a little bit of grace to fail as well. That's all I got, guys. Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of the PCS-Proof Podcast. I promise I'll be back in the next week or so with a little bit more structure, and I have a couple great episodes and some interviews planned for us in the next month or so. And if you have not already, little shameless pitch, I just launched a brand new coaching membership called the PCS-Proof Collective. It's a combination of fitness, support, nutrition guidance, a bunch of fun bonuses inside of it. There's easy grab-and-go workouts. There's the community, the global community. It's all within the collective, and it's available right now, but the doors close on Monday, October 14th at midnight, and that's Pacific time. So midnight on the 14th Pacific time. So if you've not already checked that out, I highly encourage you to go over to fitpathcoaching.com/collective. That's normal spelling, collective, just to check it out. And if it seems like it's a good fit for you, it's available for you. No contracts. You can cancel anytime. So there's no risk to try it out for a month or so. All right. Thank you again. I will look forward to seeing you right back here in 1 week's time. Go watch some baseball. And remember, no matter where in the world military life sends you, together we are PCS Proof. Adios.
And here is the legal language. This podcast is for informational purposes only and is not intended to replace professional advice. The views expressed in this podcast may not be those of the host or fitpathcoaching.com. Moreover, we are not responsible for any losses, damages, or liabilities that may arise from the use of this podcast.